Good afternoon and welcome to Virtual Face-to-Face with President Bruce Jarrell. I'm Alex Lukowski, VP of Communications. Pharmacies are not okay. Your local Walgreens and CVS and Rite Aid are not okay. It's a soup of danger with ingredients from companies who have lost the core belief of what we do, which is patient care and patient focus. Those words of frustration were uttered by an Oklahoma pharmacist explaining the impetus behind last November's Pharmageddon, if you remember that. That was when thousands of pharmacists in 15 states walked off the job to protest increasing workloads, rising stress, and more frequent encounters with overwrought and distressed patients. The past few years certainly have been tough ones for many pharmacists and pharmacy schools, and made even harder by the demands of the pandemic. Many experienced baby boomers and even older Gen X pharmacists in the retail sector have called it quits or moved to less demanding non-retail jobs. At the same time, enrollments in professional practice, PharmD programs, have plummeted at schools all over the country. That's a big change from just a few years ago. Pharmacy Times headline in 2016 worried, "Are pharmacy schools growing too fast?" The website noted that from 2005 to 2012, a minimum of 4 new pharmacy schools opened each year, and several existing programs expanded. And no wonder, the baby boom generation was headed for retirement. The pharmacist's scope of practice was continuing to expand into medication therapy management, monitoring chronic diseases, ordering and administering vaccines, even prescribing medication. And you can thank people like former Dean Natalie Eddington for continuing to push the scope of practice. And we should note that that demographic shift isn't over. The World Bank recently predicted that by 2050, 1.5 billion people will be 65 or older on the planet, facing more chronic conditions than ever, and likely no end to high health care and prescription costs and other barriers to care. And that's likely to push the job market somewhat away from dispensing roles toward positions in healthcare settings and patient care-oriented roles like ambulatory care. The most recent demand report from the American Association of Colleges of Pharmacy showed 61,000 job openings for pharmacists during the first 3 quarters of 2023. It's about 18% more than the previous year. And somewhat more than half of those were in the retail sector and about a third in clinical or hospital roles. And the number of available jobs continues to rise. But enrollments are headed the other way. 10 years ago, our School of Pharmacy had 635 spring semester PharmD students. Today, that number has fallen to 329, and it's the same everywhere. The AACP says the number of graduates from 4-year pharmacy programs dropped from a little over 14,000 in 2021 to just a little over 13,000 in 2022. That's the largest single-year drop since 1983. All of that, and certainly some residual impact from Pharmageddon, is spurring the industry to action. Last month, Walgreens announced the creation of the Walgreens Dean's Advisory Council, aimed at strengthening relationships with colleges of pharmacy across the United States. According to a press release from the company, the goal is to better support pharmacists' care to their local communities. But pharmacy education is not just a numbers game. It is not just about PharmD programs either. Anyone who's been around UMB knows about all of the other groundbreaking aspects of our own School of Pharmacy. Ours is one of the top research schools in the country. We launched the nation's first Master's in Medical Cannabis Science and Therapeutics in 2019, just in time for our experts and graduates to guide Maryland's transition to legal cannabis. We also have some very strong master's programs in regulatory science, palliative care, pharmacometrics, PhD programs in health services research and pharmaceutical sciences, and an array of dual degree programs, all aimed at preparing students to fill the needs in all of the various areas of pharmacy science. And of course, I would be chastised by my colleague Becky Sorrell if I didn't mention that our school is the exclusive home of Pharmapreneurship. Entrepreneurial pharmacy is nothing new, of course. You know there'd be no Merck, Sharp, and Dohm without University of Maryland School of Pharmacy grads Alpheus Sharp and Louis Dohm, class of 1842 and 1857, respectively. No CoverGirl or Noxema without George Bunting, class of 1899. And no Correct RX Pharmacy Services without Ellen Yankelo, who we know very well, class of 1996. No, pharmapreneurship is not new, but it has been reinvigorated at the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy and now trademarked, too. So what's the plan for attracting students and preparing them for a challenging and changing future? Joining the conversation with all of the answers, I hope, is our own Dean of the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy, Dr. Sarah Michel. She's just in her 6th month as Dean, but her 20th year on faculty at UMB. And during that time, Michel has served as chair of the Department of Pharmaceutical Sciences, associate dean for graduate programs, president of the Faculty Senate, interim dean when Dean Natalie Eddington stepped down, and of course, as a recognized pharmaceutical researcher. So welcome, Dean Michel. And for the audience, get your questions ready for later in the program. Write them in the chat area whenever they pop into your head. And we'll talk about whether you want to ask them yourself or you prefer anonymity. Hopefully, we'll hear your voice. But now, please welcome our host, UMB President, Dr. Bruce Jarrell.
Thank you, Alex, and it's a pleasure to be here. And I'd like to welcome you all to this face-to-face with Dean Michel. I got to know Sarah, I guess it was back in 2016 when she was president of the Faculty Senate, and have worked with her since that time on many different occasions. And now here she is as dean, certainly of a very capable, very accomplished school. So let me start, Sarah, by simply asking you the question, what drove you to take on this challenge as dean?
Well, thank you, President Jarrell, and thank you, Alex, for that wonderful sort of introduction to sort of the state of pharmacy today. That's a really good question. So I've been here in the school, as you said, almost 20 years. This is where I started my professional career after I finished my postdoc. And my goal was really to be a professor. I wanted to have a research lab. I wanted to train students. I wanted to teach. And that was something that I was really excited to do in Pharmaceutical Sciences, the department that I'm still in this school, because it's a very diverse department. And there were a lot of women faculty, which was not so common when I'd started. And so I did that, right? I started doing research. I started training students and teaching. But along the way, I had a number of opportunities to do things outside of that role, and where I had some impact. And I think it started with, I was the Pharmaceutical Sciences graduate program director. And in that role, I recognized that we, while we had a lot of really strong graduate students, there wasn't really the diversity that one would hope for within those ranks. And I was able to partner with the Meyerhoff program at UMBC, and we then got a T32 joint training grant with them, which we then turned into an IMSD training grant with the School of Medicine. And we were able to really increase the diversity of the students that we were recruiting and training. And sort of, I think that showed me that I could have impact sort of beyond just my lab. And then I had a number of other experiences that really showed me that. The Faculty Senate that Dr. Jarrell just brought up, when I was on the Faculty Senate, there was a bill in Annapolis that wanted to merge our campus with the campus of College Park. And on behalf of the faculty, we were not in favor of this merger. We felt we would lose a lot of the things that were really unique to our school. And I had the opportunity to testify on behalf of the faculty. And I think that the testimony I gave, along with many other folks' testimony, was really critical, because instead of merging the two campuses, we got Empower the State, which I know many of you know about. And that's been a really, wonderful thing for our school. It's been lots of in our university. And so again, it was sort of this opportunity to really make some impact. And the other positions you mentioned too that I've had sort of along the years that have given me that opportunity. And so, when the position for dean became available, I realized that it was something that I could perhaps sort of build upon these other experiences that I've had and really grow the school. I mean, we have a terrific school. We had a Natalie Eddington leaves certainly very big footsteps to follow. And I felt like I could continue to grow the school in excellence in a variety of different areas.
Great, thank you for that. So you've now been in this seat for 5 months. I'm sure it's an exciting ride. How are you going to fix this issue of not enough students going into pharmacy, into PharmDs? What's your solution there, Sarah?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that's the challenge or the opportunity, right? So as Alex mentioned, we in all schools of pharmacy have seen quite a precipitous drop in the number of students applying and being in pharmacy school. And I think there's a couple of reasons we've learned why this has happened. One is because there's so many pharmacy schools. We used to have 70 pharmacy schools in the US. We have 143 now. And there's this perception that the role of the pharmacist is very difficult. So during COVID, you saw pharmacists, feeling overworked and underappreciated, if you will. And I think one of the things is that folks don't really understand what the pharmacist of today and tomorrow can do. And so the whole role and scope of practice for pharmacists has really changed significantly. And, sort of to go into more detail, you could sort of put it into three different buckets, right? We have our pharmacists who graduate from our program who go to work in community pharmacy. So those are the folks that you see if you go to an independent pharmacy or a chain pharmacy. And they're really the medication therapy experts. And today in Maryland, our pharmacists can vaccinate, our pharmacists can prescribe some different medications. And so the role of the pharmacist is really growing, and that's really exciting. Some of our pharmacists in that arena are being very pharmapreneurial. They're coming up with new ways to sort of incorporate telemedicine or other factors. And so that's one thing I think folks are less aware of what pharmacists do in that arena. Another area that our pharmacists go into is clinical. A lot of our pharmacy graduates do residencies, and then they work in a variety of different settings in teams. And it's really the pharmacist that brings the expertise about medication, right? And then finally, a lot of our pharmacy graduates, or more and more of our pharmacy graduates, go into fellowships. They go and work in the pharmaceutical industry in clinical settings. And so I think what we need to do, and what we are doing, is we're completely reimagining our PharmD curriculum. So I have this terrific group of faculty who are leading this reimagination, and we're updating our curriculum, imagining it so that our students can go on to do all of these different things that pharmacists now do. So I think that's one thing we're doing. And the other thing I think we really need to do is tell the world, tell our stories of what pharmacists do. We have folks in all of these different arenas doing really exciting things. And I think that's not the perception of the public as what pharmacists do.
So my guess is not many of the audience has had the great pleasure of going down to Annapolis to testify before the legislature. What was that like back then? When you
That's a great question. So it was somewhat intimidating. So, when I was in high school, I was on the speech and debate team. I grew up in high school in Florida, and we used to go once a year to Tallahassee. We would take over the Senate part of the legislature there, and we'd all pretend to be legislators and talk about bills. And so I think I tried to channel that a little bit when I went to Annapolis. I tried to write very clear testimony. However, it wasn't really like the experience I had in high school where we were pretending, to be in this setting. It was real, right? And so we sat at this table, and I had this wonderful testimony prepared. And as soon as I sat up there, the person leading the committee said, "Oh, don't read your testimony. Just give me some bullet points." So I was a little bit taken aback, but I went through my bullets, and she nodded her head, and the folks sitting in the room nodded their heads. So I felt like I delivered what I was supposed to deliver, but it was certainly, not like what you see on TV or what you pretend to do when you're in high school.
It's an experience.
Yes.
We'll spend more time down there because you're going to be advocating for scope of practice and other activities that pharmacists do as well. So get used to it.
Okay.
Get used to it. Now you were very involved with Dean Eddington when it came to the medical cannabis science degree. Tell us sort of how that came to be.
Sure. So, Dean Eddington, I think was just very prescient, right? So we had this we saw that there was this drop in PharmD students applying to our program. We also, though, at the same time realized, and this is something that I think, the Dean Eddington did with sort of a number of programs, realized that there were these areas which we pharmacy school faculty had expertise in, for which, were sort of future areas that we needed to be teaching and training students in. And so the Medical Cannabis Science and Therapeutics program, which is led by my colleagues Leah Sarah and Chad Johnson, and then Andy Coop is quite involved in it as well, really addressed this need that there was medical cannabis approved in Maryland, and then now adult use cannabis. And it really taught very broadly, all aspects of the field to a variety of different folks. And so they put together this fabulous program. My involvement was I was the associate dean for graduate programs, so I stewarded the program and really, worked on sort of identifying who were more students, to come into this program.
It was a lot of fun, and it exceeded your wildest expectations, didn't it?
It certainly did. We had a lot of students. I think the first year we were hoping for 50 students, and I think we had 250 students. So people were knocking on the doors to come in. And so we were really excited to bring the students in. And those alumni are all of our alumni are fabulous, but those alumni are really engaged and really excited and really pushing that field of, to the edge.
So I hear there's talk about another Schedule I drug becoming legalized at least in certain circumstances in the U.S. or in Maryland. Tell us a little bit about that, if you know about it.
I probably don't know as much as you're probably asking me. I know that there's I know we have an interest in potentially pursuing sort of psychedelics education. Is that the area you're thinking about?
Yeah.
So again, because we're pharmaceutical sciences, we have several colleagues who are real experts in this area. One of my colleagues, Andy Koop, spent many years doing research in sort of related areas. And so we're interested to see, is this a program that we could develop to sort of support this drug coming to approval? And I think our approach there is to start with a certificate program. And so, as many of folks watching know, both the School of Pharmacy and the University of Maryland, Baltimore have really this kind of really great approach to starting new programs, be they certificate or master's programs, to meet the needs of tomorrow's students. And so we're thinking, we're putting together the idea for a certificate in this area to address this potential future Schedule I designation.
Yeah, it's exciting and scary at the same time for me.
Yes.
I don't know much about those drugs. I will tell the audience that the number of hoops we had to go through with the Attorney General's office to get approval for the medical cannabis program was not insignificant. And they had a very high level of concern about what we could teach and what we couldn't teach, et cetera. And so I'm sure for psilocybin and some of those other drugs, they'll have equal or even more intense opinions. And so, of course, we will follow those opinions naturally. Before I get to Alex's, I'm sure Alex has got a few questions. Let me ask you one other question. So I've been in medicine and medical research for a long time, and I've never really understood metals in medicine. And you have this funny area of interest. I say funny because it's one I don't know much about, called zinc fingers. Could you just tell us in a couple of sentences, what does that mean?
Sure. What does that mean? What is a zinc finger, right? So metals are super important, right? And a third of all our proteins in our body use a metal, right? And we know that some metals are important, zinc is one of them. Like, we need zinc to survive. It's important for human health. And zinc is often found in proteins that regulate DNA or RNA, so regulate transcription and translation. And I think about 5% of all proteins have that role, so these zinc finger type proteins. And when these proteins were first discovered, what they worked out is the protein was kind of like a piece of string. I want to think about it. So a string is an unraveled piece of string. It's just sort of floppy. Once you added the zinc, you get this chemistry occurring. You get these bonds between the zinc and the amino acids on your protein, and it gets this three-dimensional structure. So kind of like you tied a bow or something. And it turned out that the three-dimensional structure of the first zinc finger looked a bit like a finger. So the scientists that got that structure thought it looked like a finger, and there's actually a few of them in a row. And that protein binds to DNA, so it intercalates into the groove of the DNA. So it was sort of like these fingers fitting into a glove almost, if you will. So these proteins were dubbed zinc fingers. And now we know that they're really common, right? There's lots of different types. And unfortunately, subsequent structures of other zinc fingers don't look at all like fingers, but that name has stuck. It's sort of a historic name. So it's the shape of this protein. But they're very important for DNA or RNA regulation, and they have this kind of cute name.
That's interesting, because in the blacksmithing world, if you heat a piece of metal with zinc on it, you get very sick. It's called metal fume disease.
Yikes.
Obviously, too much zinc is not good at all.
Which is not good. There's a balance. You need just the right amount. It's kind of like Goldilocks.
That's the right amount, exactly.
Yeah.
Alex, you got one or two questions, do you?
I do. I am so glad you asked that question, because I stopped counting how many journal articles you've written that mention zinc fingers. I thought that was that's very fascinating. Yeah, I want to bring in Kathina Storm. Kathina, you have a question about well, you ask it. You have this interesting question. Kathina, are you there?
There's any, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, okay. If there's any interest in adding kind of cultural pharmaceutical practices to our school, so, herbal alternative medicines that are used by different cultural groups or racial groups.
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. I mean, over the years, I know we've had folks do research in different areas of, herbal medicine. I think we of some time ago, we had a researcher working on, some of the Chinese herbal medicines and things like that, because there's certainly this idea, right? And there's knowledge that, from these sort of products, there are medicinal qualities. I think that's a really interesting idea. I think it's something that I can certainly bring to our curriculum redesign committee. It's sort of, I think that's a great question and something to think about, but thank you.
All right. Andy Coop has got a question. You mentioned him, so go with Andy.
Thanks, Alex. Can you hear me, Alex?
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead, Andy.
Excellent. I've been mentioned before several times, but I wanted, Sarah, just to ask you about the MS in Pharmaceutical Sciences located at Shady Grove and your vision for when you set that together in terms of working closely with Shady Grove, but also training the biomedical biomedical workforce for the state.
Sure. No, thanks, Andy. So that's actually a program that I started a few years ago when I was still the PhD program director. And so we have a degree of PhD in Pharmaceutical Sciences. It's a traditional PhD program, but we understood that there is a need for master's degrees in Pharmaceutical Sciences. And so the idea here is that students graduating from college with, say, a biology degree or a chemistry degree, there's a gap in the skills that they need to work in the pharmaceutical industry. And so we wanted to fill that gap. And so the way that I started this program was I recognized that one way to fill this gap was to sort of have hands-on experience for the students. And so our program is a 16-month program. Students spend 1 year in didactic coursework. They learn the gamut of principles of drug design and development. And then they go out for 6 months to do biopharmaceutical internships. And so they're in laboratories, either in industry, government, or sometimes some research laboratories. And they really learn how a pharmaceutical researcher works. And we've got a great partnership with AstraZeneca. We also partner with the Biopark. And a lot of our graduates go on actually to get hired by the places that they do their biopharmaceutical internships. And I think that this sort of philosophy that we develop master's programs that lead to career readiness is very important, because we know that there are certain areas that we really need folks to be trained in. And so we try to meet those needs by developing such programs and bringing in the expertise of our colleagues. I think I'll add that the program is at Shady Grove and at the Baltimore campus. And Shady Grove, for those of you who haven't been down there recently, is really this bustling place. There's the multiple schools on the Shady Grove campus, but then surrounding the campus, there's just a huge amount of growth of pharmaceutical companies, for which I think there's lots of job opportunities for folks interested in that area.
Right. And all of our So we have a pharmacy presence there now. We have a heavy nursing presence. School of Social Work is there. There's a dental school clinic there now. So we've got a fair amount of presence down there, and it's a very nice opportunity for people. So good point. Alex?
Well, you just talked about this, but maybe there's more to elaborate on. Someone writes, do you have ideas about ways to create more relationships with industry that can be maybe marketed as a draw for PharmD students considering UMSOP?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So one thing that I really, I have a couple different directions that I'm thinking about here that I think would be really important. So one thing is we're reimagining the PharmD curriculum. And because we know that about 25% of our graduates report that they go to work in the pharmaceutical industry in some manner when they finish, I'm focusing on creating a fellowship program that our PharmD students, once they finish PharmD school, could then participate in. And it's the idea is that the fellowship program would allow us to connect with the local industry, and we'll try and make it nationwide. So industry in the country, also our connections with things such as the FDA and the NIH, and sort of provide PharmD graduates the opportunity to then go and work in these settings and then eventually then become, pharmacists working in these different settings. And we currently have several fellowships. We have several with AstraZeneca, but I'd like to really expand this given our understanding that this is where a lot of our PharmD graduates want to be when they finish. And it's also, I think, a really important place for PharmD graduates to be, because again, the medication experts are our pharmacy students, our PharmD graduates, and really bringing that perspective to the industry, I think, can be very powerful. And so in Shady Grove is one of the places I'd really like to sort of work on this, again, because we have such terrific opportunities and connections with the campus. Baltimore too, though, we have this right outside my window. We have this beautiful new biopark coming up. I think it's almost finished, the new biopark building. And I think there's going to be lots of opportunities for our students there. So I think that's really an important thing for our folks to work in. Another area, I think, is because we have this master's in pharmaceutical sciences, which is growing, and we have these internship opportunities. I'd like to think about ways to connect that with our PharmD degree to really offer these shorter term opportunities as well.
Thank you. Alex?
All right, maybe it's because you mentioned your postdoc work. Someone writes, I've always been interested in how pharmacists, scientists, physicians, nurses, dentists, and others with specific expertise transition to institutions that are like businesses like UMB. What's that transition been like for you?
Oh, so going from being in biophysics to being
right.
Yeah. So that's a good question. And so my PhD was actually in chemistry, and then I did biophysics for my postdoc. So these are pretty fundamental areas. And when I was looking for academic positions, almost 20 years ago now, more than 20 years ago, I guess now, I looked at mostly chemistry departments, but there was this job in the Pharmaceutical Sciences department, the one I ended up fortunately getting and taking on, that was really appealing to me because our department, our Pharmaceutical Sciences department, is incredibly diverse. So we have folks that do medicinal chemistry all the way to clinical trials. Folks work on nanomedicine, folks work in cell biology. And I realized that although I had this very specific focus, if I went to a department like Pharmaceutical Sciences, if I was fortunate to be offered the job there, I would be able to collaborate with lots of folks to really sort of broaden what I do in my research. And that's really something that really, proved to be true. For example, I was involved in a clinical trial on iron nanomedicines with my colleague, Jim Pauly, who's a pharmaceutics person, and my colleague, Maureen Kane, who runs our mass spectrometry center. And we partnered with Dr. Jeff Fink at UMS. And so that was this really neat thing that I got to do that was way out of, what I had done fundamentally. I currently have a project on electronic cigarettes with folks in my school and the dental school. So I think one real benefit, and I think you have to be open to sort of broadening what you do. You don't just do your fundamental research, which is super important, and I love fundamental research, but also thinking about how you can connect the area of research you work in to things that others in the school have, or university have. And I would say that's really a wonderful thing about our university as a whole. There's such opportunities for collaborative research and translational research. And I'll add one more thing, because I know I'm talking a lot here, but it then goes on to how we teach, right? We can take this knowledge and teach our students.
Thank you, Alex.
Well, I can't let this go. This is from me. This is not from the audience, but you just mentioned e-cigarettes. I'm sure everyone's curious what you're doing with that.
Electronic cigarettes, right?
Yeah.
They're ubiquitous. So the Center for Tobacco Products, which is part of the FDA, is charged with regulating them. But because there's so many out there and there's not much work known on them, we were fortunate to get funding to study them. And my contribution to this is metals, right? So I love zinc. It's a positive metal. There's also lots of toxic metals. And we did these early studies, myself and some colleagues, both in the pharmacy school and the dental school, where we were able to show that if you buy different electronic cigarettes and you examine what's in the solvent, if you will, there's things like lead and chromium and nickel, which you don't want to be inhaling. And so we and others have shown that there's toxic metals in these products. And now we're trying to understand what happens to, the effects on physiology. And so that's where I got involved in this. And again, I think it's this example of having such great interdisciplinary research here. My colleague, Richard Dalby, we have 2 electronic cigarette smoking machines. We can vape any product you want and tell you what's in it. So there's really, it's just been very interesting. And hopefully it will affect, human health in this manner.
Wow, I'd like to see that electronic smoking
Come
machine.
on over in Pharmacy Hall, our beautiful building. I can show it to you. We can give you a demo.
Okay.
Sarah, who's your sponsor for that research?
The Food and Drug Administration, the Center for Tobacco Products, the FDA, yes.
And they're the ones that are regulating e-cigarettes.
That's right. That's right. So there was the Smoking and Tobacco Control Act that regulated conventional, combustible cigarettes, and then there was an amendment to that. So now we also will regulate e-cigarettes. So they actually have to go through an approval process, even though they're potentially toxic, to be manufactured.
Yeah. And there was a big discussion several years ago about some really bad actors in that vaping. What was that about? Do you remember?
Yeah, well, I mean, so there's a lot of different angles, right? That there's one angle is who they're being marketed to, right? So the initial intent for these products is they're a reduced harm alternative to conventional combustible cigarettes because they don't have tobacco in them, right? They have nicotine, flavorants, which are a little bit variable. Inadvertently, we learn metals. But they were being marketed to teens, right, and young people. They were, the way that many of these products look, they look like little flash drives, or they look like little, they're designed in a way. So there was a lot of controversy about that. And then over the years, they've taken away some of the different flavorings and some of the different components. Things have been banned. But it really, so that was the problem. And then there have been all sorts of different reports of different constituents causing different health effects. Some of them are anecdotal, some of them, we have more evidence for. And it's just, people think they're regulated because you can buy them, in a store, but at this point, we're still at the point of figuring out what to regulate. So I think that's the challenge.
Thank you. Alex?
All right, I want to bring in James Brissett. And if I'm not mistaken, you might be a professor at another USM school. Are you there, James?
Hi, Alex. I think you passed it to me. Is that true?
Oh, did I?
You
Yeah,
did?
I opened your mic. Go ahead.
You did. There was a lag there.
Oh, okay.
The last thing I heard before you went silent was you might be mistaken about, and then that's
No,
all
I said, if I'm not mistaken, that you were a professor at one of our other USM schools.
That's correct. University of Maryland Eastern Shore, but University of Maryland Baltimore is great for or University of Maryland School of Pharmacy is great for educating folks to go to a lot of different schools. So you'll find University of Maryland grads in pharmacy schools all over the states and probably around the world.
All right. So what's your question?
Welcome, Dean Michel. What a pleasure to see you occupying that seat, especially leading one of the top 10 schools of pharmacy in the nation. As a grad, I appreciate the people that invested in me while I was at the school. And so we're glad you're here. You mentioned there was a gender gap in the Pharmaceutical Sciences department when you started over 20 years ago. And you advocated for the diversity in our School of Pharmacy and in our University of Maryland, Baltimore community. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 62 to 75% of pharmacists are women. So clearly men are a minority. Now we have a great opportunity here to help fill open seats and train more pharmacists. So what is the School of Pharmacy doing to attract and recruit men to the pharmacy profession and contribute to the diversity of the University of Maryland, Baltimore community? Over.
Yeah, that's a great question, because you're right. In the profession of pharmacy, we have more female pharmacists than male pharmacists. And so I'm embarking on a sort of a new recruiting approach for our pharmacy students, and it's really I want to tell stories. I want to tell stories of what our graduates do, and I want to have engage our alumni, our faculty, our current students in really spreading the word about what the pharmacy profession is. And while at this point our focus is not on a specific gender, we're happy, we really want to recruit the best and the brightest to our program. I think that is something for us to consider as we embark on this new recruiting approach, because I think what I've learned over the years that I've been in the school, we have so many fabulous pharmacy students. I've interacted with so many in so many different ways. For many years, I was the biochemistry professor, so that's how I interacted with them. And they've gone on to do, our graduates have gone on to do, as you note, so many different things. And so I think it's really how we tell our story about what a pharmacist does. And I'll take your point that we should be thinking about how we particularly tell the story to potential male applicants.
Alex?
Okay. We have Lois Warner. Lois, go ahead and open your mic. She has a question about opioids. Lois, are you there? I think I hear you. Well, maybe not. I'll ask it for her. Is that you, Lois? Nope. She said, she writes, the opioid crisis.
Technical difficulties. The opioid crisis in the United States is widespread, and Baltimore has been profoundly affected by the opioid epidemic. Sadly, many of us have personally experienced the devastating impact to family and friends and colleagues. What steps does UMB need to take to prepare pharmacy graduates to be effective in addressing the opioid crisis?
No, that's a great question and a very timely question. And I think we have to be very, very purposeful as we, remake our curriculum such that we teach our pharmacy students both about the pharmacology, the medication use of opioids, but how to recognize and how to deal with misuse of opioids, and how to really be, a person in the community, sort of helping to, steer the direction away from overuse. So I think it's something we really have to think about as we develop our curriculum. And I really appreciate some of these questions about sort of how we think about these things in the future, because as we, we're at this really, I think, pivotal points in sort of our school in terms of how we teach our students. And we're really trying to sort of connect the dots to make sure that we address all of these important societal problems, as well as training our students really to be, top-notch pharmacists.
I don't know if something's going on at the pharmacy school, but two different people, almost back to back, asked this almost the exact same question. They both want to know what's the most surprising thing that's happened to you in your time as dean.
The most surprising thing that's happened to me is,
it almost sounds like they know something. They know something's happened.
Is there something really I'm stumped at this question. Let's see. I think one of the things that I didn't anticipate is how much they take my picture, right? I'm constantly being asked to have my picture taken. It's like, don't they have enough pictures? But and then just sort of some of the I probably that's the most surprising thing I think so far. Maybe there's something that I'm not thinking of here that my colleagues are thinking of.
All right, a more serious question. Anonymous attendee asks, what are the scope of practice issues in Maryland that you want to address?
That's a really, really great question. So, we have some colleagues in the school who really kind of lead an advocacy at the state and the national level with regards to sort of how scope of practice should be expanded. And we recently got provider status, pharmacists got provider status in the state of Maryland. And so I think the next step for there is sort of how to implement that, how as in provider status, how folks can be reimbursed. And there's an economic as well as a sort of a scientific reason to sort of have provider status, pharmacy provider status, actually economically positive to do that. And then there's also immunizations. Pharmacists can immunize, and there's a push to have more breadth in the immunizations, and also so those are sort of big areas that folks are working in. And then it's really connected to sort of the role of the pharmacist in provider status. It connects to sort of the in the pharmacy, having pharmacists have the ability to sort of do all the things that they're able to do now. So vaccinate and immunize and so forth.
There was also discussion, wasn't there, Sarah, about having pharmacists involved in managing some chronic diseases?
That's right. So long-term, managing chronic diseases, having the pharmacist, be the person that one goes to for that. I think that, some other things that folks are very interested in are, just the laws related to drug therapy management. So pharmacists can participate more. And I think there's also this big question about population health and sort of having protocols to sort of allow pharmacists to have more of a role there as well.
Okay, Alex?
Okay, Christine Valerian asks that I read this question. If I can find it. Yes, she says, how about the ripple effects of the Supreme Court decision on mifepristone for patients, the FDA, and pharmacists?
That's a good question. I mean, I think it's something we're just starting to try to understand what those effects will be. I think we need to talk about this. It's something we're just trying to understand at this point.
Okay. One of my favorite faculty members is feeding me questions, and I'm not gonna out him, but he writes, but it's a good question. Can you tell us about the important work of the Poison Center?
No, that's great. In fact, I had an opportunity to go to the Poison Center last week, I think it was, and listen in on some of the calls. And so I think not everyone knows that the School of Pharmacy houses the Maryland Poison Center. And this is, if you have any indication that you might have been poisoned by taking, and I learned poison is taking a pill, being bitten inadvertently, being bitten by a snake, being exposed to X, Y, or Z, you call the Poison Center. They're available 24 hours a day, and they will really take you through how to address your concern. They'll connect you with, the correct hospital to go to if you need to do that. And I think what really impressed me about the Poison Center when I visited, when I listened to the calls, is the way that our folks in the Poison Center work is they are so calm and collected when some panic, you're panicked if you think you've been poisoned in some manner. And our folks at the Poison Center are really calm and collected, and really, it was just a pleasure to see how well they handled all of the calls. And they handle, I'm not going to get the number right, hundreds of thousands of calls, in their center, and really do so with just such, grace and professionalism that they really help, mitigate a lot of the challenges. And I learned when I spoke with the folks at the Poison Center that, one of the things they really are proud of is the way that they're able to, avoid unneeded sort of trips to the emergency room by folks, so that the folks that really need to be going to the emergency room are getting the care that they need. And so they really are doing a terrific job. And I really, feel like it's sort of a little bit of a hidden secret that we have this Poison Center. It's in your building, Bruce, or Dr. Jarrell, and it's a really fabulous center.
Yeah, it's celebrated 50 years. It was 50 years.
Yeah, they gave me a mug that I've been, the Poison Center, yes.
Yeah. How about other questions, Alex?
Well, let me bring in Chanel Whitaker, who just popped in with a question. Chanel, go ahead and open your mic, if you would. You know what? We're not having luck with WebEx today here. Chanel, are you there? Well, I don't hear her. Well, I'm going to read her question. She said, continuing with a similar question as Dr. Brissett mentioned, related to groups that are not well represented in pharmacy, as part of our mission, as part of much of the broader national conversation on structural inequities in the biomedical sciences, how is the School of Pharmacy contributing to building a professional workforce, scientists, researchers, and the professoriate that is reflective of the community that the school is anchored in and serves? Very important.
That's a very important question. Yeah. And I mean, it's something that, when I talked about my vision as the dean, one important aspect of my vision is to really ensure that we have equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging in all aspects of the school. And when I took on the role as the dean, I had the advantage of having already in place an assistant dean for equity, diversity, and inclusion, Chanel Whitaker. Chanel, I've been working closely with Chanel, and Chanel's leading a task force. We're putting together a strategic plan for equity, diversity, and inclusive excellence. It's called Beyond Excellence, Inclusive Excellence. And really what Chanel put together, she asked people to volunteer for this task force, and we were really pleased that many of our faculty, students, and staff volunteered for this extra work to be on this task force. And this task force is really looking at all aspects of our school, identifying current strengths, but also where we have gaps, where we really need to focus our efforts so that we train and build a diverse workforce. And so I think that's a really important focus. And then connected to that, I mean, I think we're really grateful that we then have at the campus level, Dr. Diane Ford Berthoud and her group, they've got, if no one's looked at it yet, they have this really terrific data dashboard that helps you sort of understand sort of where we are now in different aspects of our schools and our university. And it helps us think about sort of where we want to be. And so, this is a very important thing that we're focused on with our school. We're remaking our curriculum, and in that we are really being very purposeful to make sure that we think about these questions as we train our students.
I tried to get Chanel back in here at the end. It says it's still not working, so sorry about that, Chanel. That's a great topic.
What else you got?
Well, I don't think we have any questions from the audience right now. It's a good time to write your question.
I could put a plug in for Pharmapreneurship here because I mentioned it at the beginning, but I'd like to bring it back up because I think this is a really important thing that our school is doing as well. Pharmapreneurship is this idea, and you sort of brought this up at the beginning, that our graduates go on to do innovative things. So they're trained in one area, but then they go on and do these really creative, innovative things that the way that they're trained in our school leads them to do. And there's so many neat examples that I'm learning as I reach out with our alumni as to sort of what folks are doing. So for example, Some of you might not know that you need a pharmacist for NASA, right? So the very first pharmacist to work for NASA is one of our pharmacy school grads, and she recognized that someone needed to be, you know, in charge of that aspect of space exploration. And so she does all the medication for folks in the space center, space station, et cetera. And so, you know, I think that's an example of a really neat pharmapreneur we had recently. You know, and so I think that's the thing that I also think want to tell the stories for our school. So how folks are being pharmapreneurial as they finish up in our programs.
You know, I should say that anywhere in the world outside of the U.S. and Canada, Merck is still called Merck Sharp and Dome. How about it? It still says MSD. So.
That's so interesting. Yeah, yeah.
Sarah, maybe I got a question for you in terms of research. So I know the school gets ranked pretty highly in terms of research. You might spend a minute or two talking about where are there areas to grow and who's really the premier research programs. I presume UCSF and Michigan are two. And you'll probably know some of the others. And what are they doing that we need to be considering relative to research?
Sure, no, that's a great question. Yeah, so so within our school we have two areas that we sort of do research in. I guess actually 3 areas. One is our Pharmaceutical Sciences department, which is what I would sort of, you know, this is the wet bench research, primarily sort of biomedical type research. Then we have folks that work in the area of health services research, health equities research, outcomes research. This is more of the social sciences, economics, epidemiology type researchers. And then some of our clinical faculty also do research. And we've been really very successful in getting single PI grants. We also have some wonderful umbrella grants. We have this, for example, this FDA CIRSE grant. We've got more of these T32 training grants. But I think for us to grow even more is we have to, I think, be very focused on some more programmatic grants as well. So that's correct. Sort of our peers that we aspire to are folks such as UCSF and UNC Chapel Hill. And I think the schools that really, you know, do a terrific job in research, and we do a terrific job, I would say, is they also bring in these programmatic grants. And I think we're really primed to do this because we have folks working in these diverse areas that we could bring together to get some of these more thematic programmatic grants. And I think also, I'm really excited about some of the new institutes that are coming in this area. So the Institute for Healthcare Computing, IBBR down in near Shady Grove. You know, we have both the nursing and the medical school do, you know, research that folks in dental we've collaborated with before. So I think bringing schools together as well would be a really important thing to think about.
Can I just, someone I think has heard earlier, you said the word herbs, and they're asking, where did you grow up and how did you come to Maryland?
That's super. Yeah, so my last name is Michel, which is French. My dad is French, but my mother is English, and I moved to the US when I was 8. I lost most of my accent except for my A's. So when I was in graduate school and I was a TA for organic chemistry, and I had to do reactions and use water, H2O as something everybody would sort of laugh at me, but it's really my O's. Like I can't, herb, like certain words I still sound English, but because I was born in England. But yeah, so sort of English and French, but moved to the US when I was 8.
One follow-up on the research and education. So I think you have been to one of the Big Ten pharmacy dean meetings. So tell people about the Big Ten and the fact that we're part of it and what advantage that brings to us.
Right, so it's really fabulous being part of the Big Ten, and I think, I'm not sure what the number is, but I know it's more than 10 schools are part of the Big Ten, but you know, a number of the top research pharmacy schools in the US belong to the Big Ten, and there's this wonderful consortium. The pharmacy school deans meet once a month virtually, and then we meet in person at the annual AACP meeting. In addition, some of our associate deans, those that focus in some different areas, assessment, EDI, finance, I'm probably missing experiential learning, I think, also meet with their counterparts at the other Big Ten Big Ten schools. And I think this really helps us to think about collectively some of the challenges and opportunities in pharmacy education. It also helps us think about ways to be innovative and just really bounce ideas off each other. And I found it to be really helpful for me because there are a lot of both, there's sort of a mix of new deans and really experienced deans in the Big Ten. And so folks are really helpful about answering questions. Well, how do you think about this? Or how do you approach this? And so it's been this, I guess maybe that's a surprise. That's been a wonderful surprise. We got the picture taking. That's been a really nice surprise in taking on this role, sort of the collegiality of the other Big Ten deans and sort of this community where we all have this common goal of growing and supporting our pharmacy schools in excellence, both in, education and research and service.
Yeah, I was at the time when College Park switched to the Big Ten from the ACC, I think I just wondered what was the motivation. The answer given back was, well, part of that was academic, that the academic structure in the Big Ten is quite robust. And I think what I've seen with pharmacy, with social work, with nursing, with dentistry, has been quite strong. I don't think the medical school has gotten much involved with that. And the law school, I think, has their own set of relationships. But it's been for those schools, I think, a really good addition, something we couldn't add before. So it's a good additive function. So, Alex, you got any other questions?
Yeah, well, you mentioned partnerships with industry earlier. You were talking about that. As someone writes, what about enhanced partnerships with local undergrad institutions as a pathway to PharmD? I assume we do some of that now, but
we do some, but I love that question because that is something I'm also very focused on. So many of our peer institutions often have the undergrad at the same campus as the graduate school, right? And so they have real connections between undergraduate majors and then the PharmD. We're separate, right? We only have our PharmD program here. But I think there's this real opportunity to partner with undergraduate institutions around the state of Maryland. And I'd really like to develop some of these 3-4 programs that some other states have. And that means the student goes to undergraduate for 3 years. And then they come to the PharmD program for 4 years. They're accepted in high school, so they're early acceptance programs. And the way we work out the curriculum, the student receives their bachelor's degree. They can use the courses from their first year of PharmD as well as their PharmD degree. And I think those connections are really vital to make. I think they address a lot of questions, challenges that we have in education today. One is price, right? You would say 1 year of paying for college. And the second is it really puts you on a path to a career, which I know that another issue is college debt, and you finish and you're not quite sure where you're going to go, but yet you have all of this debt. And I think it's another way for us to really tell the world what pharmacists do and how it's such an important and rewarding profession.
Well, how do you tell high school students, how do you educate them as to the possibilities, what you can do with a pharmacy degree? Because that's,
That's tricky. I think there's lots of different ways, right? So this is more on the research side, but I've had the high school students in my lab probably every summer that I've been here. And I think, high school students today are smart. They take a lot of AP classes early on and things like that. And I think that, I think you just got to bring them onto campus, honestly, and show them what we're doing, show them what's going on. And I think connecting with students is important. It's great to see a faculty member, but seeing an actual student who's experiencing, in their journey, in their educational journey, they're in pharmacy school, serving as mentors to them. I think there's lots of ways to do this. And I think we need to just connect more and bring more folks in. I mean, we're finally, knock on wood, post-COVID, right? And so I think it's opportunities to really open up our school and our to high school students.
Well, I think we're out of time. First of all, it's been a great discussion, Dean Michel. My great pleasure to have you here on the show and to hear about your ideas and questions from the audience. Alex, again, thank you for hosting this. For those of you in the audience, thank you for being here. Maybe we'll have her back sometime. We'll see.
Thank you all, and thanks for the great questions. Take care.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.